Hello. Today we have on the show Hanah Huber. Hanah is the founder of Amsterdam Academy Press and author of the book Place, a story about finding one's home in the world while living abroad. She's originally from the US and has made her life in the Netherlands. Over the years, she has spent time enabling others to experience living internationally through her work as Center Director at CIEE, which stands for the Council on International Educational Exchange. In 2014, she founded Amsterdam Academy, and in 2015, she started Spark, a platform for female CEOs and business owners in the Netherlands and beyond to connect and grow their businesses. In January of this year, she founded Amsterdam Academy Press, where she brings stories to life by empowering and supporting authors on their journey to self-publish. They have since brought 6 titles to life, including the most recent, Phantom Parents, Memoir of an Adoptee, by David Enker. She is also the mother of 3 Dutch-American kids. Her book, Place, can be purchased on the House of Peregrine Marketplace and amsterdamacademy.com. The ebook is available on Barnes & Noble and Kobo. The audiobook will be released in summer 2023. Welcome, Hanah. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Mikkel. Thanks for having me. It's an honor.
Of course. We know each other a little bit, but I want to share with everybody. I want to start with your personal story, like how you grew up, how you ended in the Netherlands. This is kind of how we always start with our guests because we all are from somewhere else. So can you tell us that story?
Of course. Yeah, happy to. I'll try to keep it as brief as possible, but let's see where to start. I think the whole thing starts in the small town of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, where I grew up. And when I was 13, I had my first exposure to going abroad. My dad sang in this casual rock and roll band, and his drummer, who was married to a French woman, invited me to go with his daughter and his French wife and the grandmother, like in her 90s, to France for a summer. So here I am, 13, going on a plane for the first time overseas. And that was my first exposure. I spent a whole month with these 3 women, of which one was my age, traveling all throughout France, seeing sunflower fields for the first time, smelling Chanel No. 5 perfume, just being exposed to castles and history and all of this wonderful stuff that Europe has to offer. Whereas I come from a town where, it's known for the Civil War, and we go back to 1863 as being, whoa, super historic. But so it made a huge impression on me and came back to Gettysburg. And I remember sitting in class of my sophomore year in high school, and there you have homeroom. And on the loudspeaker, this announcement came on saying, do you want to go abroad? Accepting applications now for Rotary exchange students. And it's just like lightning struck. And I thought, this is it. This is what I want. I just want to get out of here. Petty high school, all the blah, 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 mean girl syndrome, all that stuff. Yeah. So I applied and was sent randomly to the Netherlands. We didn't have a choice of where to go. You could give 3 choices of where you'd prefer to go. I think I said New Zealand, Italy, and France. And somewhere where you didn't really care to go, I said Germany for whatever reason. And then I was sent to the Netherlands. And I had no idea where it was. And I remember they had that traveling performance Up With People come through town. And there was a Dutchman in that group. And I just remember meeting up with him, and he showed me pictures of the tulip fields and showed me a map of the Netherlands, kind of like an orientation meeting. And so that was it. So then as a 16-year-old sent over in 1996 to the Netherlands, lived with all these different host families, 3 months with each. So was exposed to different ways of living in Dutch culture. So one was a cabbage farmer, car salesman, scientist, so all these different ways of living as well, which I thought was really valuable, and was thrown into a Dutch high school. So full immersion, had to learn Dutch, no other choice, actually. And my host families weren't allowed to speak English to me. I just had headaches from looking up all the words. And I think we were only allowed to call home once a month. My parents weren't allowed to come over until March to visit, when we had come over in August. And so it was a very challenging year. I mean, there were lonely times. It was hard, but very character building, and picked up the language by Christmas time, speaking Dutch. And that was kind of the basis for everything from beyond that point. So I caught the travel bug and went to a college in the US, a liberal arts school that was big on study abroad. That was the reason I went there. So I did their study abroad programs in England and Italy, and just always had a love for different cultures ever since that 13-year-old trip.
So
So
that
that's a long story.
yeah, no, it's great. So that lightning moment in your class, was that when you were 14, 15?
Yeah, I was 15 at the time. Yeah.
Okay, 15. So that's a rather unusual experience, right? Like you got to experience something at a very formative age, 13, being outside of your comfort zone, traveling. And so that likely changed your life. Then you came back and learned Dutch as like a 15-year-old kid in a Dutch school, full immersion. And
Yeah.
then,
Well, yeah, 16 by the time came over, heard that announcement, 16 to
yeah,
17. Yeah. Full
wow.
immersion.
So
Yeah.
that's a hard age. And I mean, I guess it's, yeah. But then did you just stay from there or did you come back?
Then I came back for senior year of high school. So I basically skipped out on junior year of high school, which means I got out of chemistry
There we go.
and some other things. But but yeah, that was also strange coming back. And I remember just wearing like an orange boa on the plane. I think like a month or two after I got my braces off, I had this bob haircut because the cabbage farmer's wife was a hairstylist. So I came back completely transformed, which was very exciting as well.
Yeah. And not something everyone was doing, I can imagine, at that age.
Right. Yeah. Just different European flair.
Yeah. Yeah. And so do you think that was already in you because you went on that trip, the 13-year-old, before you went on this trip as a 13-year-old, do you think that this part of you to be different and experience different things was already there, or do you think it was brought out in you in that experience when you were 13?
That's a very good question. It's actually something I still think about to this day and wonder. I'm honestly not sure. I think the more time that goes by, the more I think that that's always there. I think that this drive to just experience something different. But I do think it's also at the same time important to have your curiosity sparked and be exposed to something different. And that's why, well, we'll probably get to that later with working with the American students, but just that first exposure is so important. So it's a really tricky question because
Yeah,
I think there's part of it, it's like a seed that's deep down planted somewhere, but it can't be released until you're actually exposed
that's true.
to difference.
And everyone I know has that moment they can remember, which I love. So thanks for sharing that. So then you came back. We can say you eventually settled here longer term, but how did that happen?
So yeah, went back to high school, did all the high school things, prom, homecoming, all that stuff, and then went to college. And then actually during college, I met a British man, had a relationship with him for 3 years, and at one point thought I was going to move to London. I was actually handing out my CVs all throughout my CV throughout London, hoping to get a job, or else he was going to move over to the States. But I kind of got the sense he didn't really want to. So long distance relationship there for a while, and that fizzled away. And then as I was at a friend's wedding in France, so yeah, there's a part of the story that I left out because of that trip as a 13-year-old. Became obsessed with going abroad in France, and I begged my mom to host an exchange student from France the next summer. So I became really good friends from age 14 onwards with this French girl, now woman. And so I was the witness in her wedding. So I was over at her wedding, right out of college, didn't know where I was going to live, where I was going to get a job. And then I got a call from the Dutch embassy in Washington, D.C. I had sent them a very dramatic cover letter, basically begging them for a job of anything they had available, saying, oh, it's the only place I can speak Dutch and be a dream to work with diplomats. And to my surprise, they called and said, well, we actually have a position open and we're so impressed with your letter in the administration department. So maybe not the best fit with accounting, accounts payable and receivable, paying all the paychecks of the diplomats, but it was a foot in the door. And so
Yeah.
after the wedding, I flew back to Washington. All of a sudden, I'm with a Dickinson friend of mine looking for a place to live in Washington, D.C. And that's how I met my Dutch husband because he was interning. So I started working there in August. What am I, 22 years old? And he was supposed to be there for 3 months as an intern, and we became friends at first. He was only staying for 3 months, and we fell in love, and then started out as a friendship and turned into more. And then he stayed for 2 years in Washington, and then we moved back to the Netherlands in 2004 for my master's because it was cheaper. Didn't want to take on another student loan. And we thought, before we get stuck in that whole white picket fence, 2 SUVs on the driveway, and 5 days of vacation a year, let's go to Europe where you can drive your car down to southern France, sit on the campsite for a couple weeks with your glass of rosé. That was our vision. And so that's what we did.
That is
And then one
that is
year
very
turned
specific.
into 19. Yeah.
Wait, sorry, I talked over you. One turned into 19. Is that what you said?
Yeah, 1 year turned into 19.
That story
Yep.
is so,
As it
that
often
is,
happens.
you're not the first one. So what
Yeah.
I'm learning from you is always write the dramatic cover letter.
Yes. I tell students that all the time, like, just if there's a place you want to work, go for it. Don't rule it out. Just get your foot stuck in that door. So, it's an in.
Yeah.
Just do
Yeah.
it.
So one turned into 19. I love that. And so then it seems like from what we just read in your bio, you continued your passion for wanting to give that to other students, or at least be around that same moment for
Definitely.
yourself. And so tell me a little bit about your work with the CIEE.
Well, that actually started pretty early during my master's program, which I came over for educational science and management because I was fascinated by the education systems comparing the US to the Netherlands. So I thought, okay, I'm going to get my master's in that. But the program wasn't what I thought it was going to be. So I turned into a minor, switched to American Studies, which I've always loved because that's looking at your own culture from a different perspective.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, I have the bachelor's in that. Let's go for the master's. So switch over to American Studies at the University of Amsterdam. And so as I'm starting that master's program, I got a phone call from a woman that I had met up with, who was at the time the director for Council of International Educational Exchange, which hosted U.S. college juniors, mostly juniors, coming over to the Netherlands to study at the University of Amsterdam. And she needed extra assistance, and so she hired me as her assistant. And it was perfect because it was next to my master's program. I was doing what I love, which is helping young people discover a different culture, and taking them to various places, showing them everything there is to know, whether that be riding a bike, eating herring, taking them to the Waldlopen up in Schiermonnikoog, just exposing them to as much as possible. And then eventually she left, and I took over then as the director. And it was just such rewarding work, just having students from all over the U.S., all different, everything from Ivy League to community colleges, everything. And what started out first, I think we had 25 students the first semester I worked there, and it went all the way up to 100 and some. By the time I left, we really grew the program, we grew the staff, expanded the programming, came up with a business program. So it was just there was so much potential. It was like you had your own shop in the Netherlands, and that you had this small team and a lot of freedom to develop courses for them and to do their activities and their excursions. So, it was also, very, what would you call that? Very multi-dimensional function in that you were doing the budget, the planning, the academics. You were kind of like a shrink in a sense. Everything really like the full package for these U.S. students coming over to the Netherlands.
Yeah. And what did you want? Why do you think, what gave you the most satisfaction out of that job? Was it revisiting that moment of spark?
Yeah, definitely. I think just seeing them that first week during orientation, and trying to get them safely on a bike through Amsterdam, which these days I don't know if I could, but back in the day it was much easier. And then that farewell dinner, and just to see how much they grew and learned about themselves, and that was the most rewarding, really. Just seeing how they matured, how they learned how to suspend judgment, and we actually used to measure them. We had this whole model where we'd see, people have the tendency to, especially at that age, to think, oh, what do we have in common? So, oh, you have a McDonald's here too. Oh, and look for similarities, where you really have to push them to be accepting of the differences and adapt. And the end is acceptance. So they do it differently here. This is why, and just like suspending judgment and being more open to other ways of doing things. So to actually see that process and to see that happen was really, really special.
Yeah. And it feels like that carries through your work, but also personally. Is that now, do you think, a value of yours now that you, like, is this something you're instilling in your own children, in your own family, in your own work? This openness, and you can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, no, definitely. I do try to, if the kids come home and complain about something that someone did in their class or something, I do try to just give them that skill set of putting yourself in their shoes and looking at from a different perspective. They have the privilege of going to the U.S. in the summertime and seeing a different culture, and we talk about that. but also in the process of writing the book, which I will probably get to, but during the pandemic, that was for me also a way to get over that whole thing of comparing two cultures and just kind of finding this happy medium where you shift more instead of so black and white and pros and cons, but more just kind of merging of the two. And I think in that sense, becoming more open to things. I mean, of course, we all have bad days, and there's sometimes where I'm just cursing grumpy old Dutch people who, give me slack for the dog, whatever, but also just trying to, there's also grumpy old people in the US. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's easy to forget when you don't live there, but yeah.
Yeah.
Do you, so we should mention here that you have 3 children who are both Dutch American. You're raising them here.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about having a relationship across cultures. People do it more often than they don't, but I think it brings about a unique opportunity to examine yourself and be more open. And so, can you talk about that a little bit? You've been doing it for now 19 years. Is that what you said?
Yeah. So do you mean just like floating between the two
Yeah, you're
cultures?
floating
Yeah.
between. I've never done it, so I would
Yeah.
love for you to tell us a little bit about it.
Well, it was difficult. I mean, I'll admit, just finding that balance and making sure that you get enough face time over in the U.S., like with my parents. I have 3 younger brothers and an older half sister, and of course, all my friends that are still there. So I've always tried to be good about making, and then you have to have the financial means to have the tickets in the first place. So, but making that a priority to save for the tickets to make, most of our spending goes towards going to the US, which I find important. So it's asking yourself what's important to you, and to me that's important. And
So,
keeping in
so
touch.
keeping your priorities really clear sounds like something that's
Yeah.
really important to
Yes.
maintain the relationship living abroad. But your relationship with your husband, with your kids, with your community, and your parents and community in the U.S. You have to have very
Yeah.
clear priorities. It sounds like that's important.
Clear priorities, and also make going the extra mile, making the effort to send a birthday card, to send an email to someone, to keep in touch with that aunt in New York City. Just I've always been very open with people. I feel letting them know, hey, we're going to be in town then and then. Let's try to meet up for a walk or a coffee. Just keeping those ties, I think, is really important to your hometown. And for me, it's always been very important. So I try to go back as much as I could. When the kids were young, actually, I would take them. How old was my oldest? Is Nora? She's 13 now, but how old was she when we took? I think 3 months, maybe even younger, when we took her over for the first time. And I just want to make it a normal thing. So we actually would go almost 3 times a year, sometimes when the kids were really small. And my son, who's now 8, my grandmother passed away. That was a hard moment to say goodbye over the phone. And that was tough. That was a tough moment where you have to decide, okay, am I going to say goodbye over the phone and then be there to honor her funeral? Or am I going to fly over now with this newborn that just had an operation for his hernia? And maybe just be on time to say goodbye at her deathbed, but not make it to the funeral. So those are tough decisions when you live abroad. I ended up
Those are
going
moments. I
for
think
her
that,
funeral.
yeah, that moment is one of the most impactful, I think, and maybe underrepresented in the all the adventure of living abroad is those
Yeah.
moments when you have to make these big calls.
Yes.
And I think my father was in the hospital during the pandemic, and we had to decide, do we go between, and so it was just, I think that's one of the things that I always tell people is like, have a plan for these big things. Life is happening while you're
Yeah.
on your adventure, whether large, small, long, short. Okay, so it sounds like you have really clear priorities about staying connected to your people
Yes.
there,
Definitely.
and your partner
Definitely.
shares that as well.
Yeah, and I'm lucky in that sense because I mean, my husband Joost from Groningen up north, he loves America, and so he's always been very supportive and open to moving back, going whenever. He loves to go there. So I'm lucky in that sense because I know there's people that have partners that aren't so keen on going to the home country of their partner. So yeah, he's totally open. He's the only one without a U.S. passport in our family, but he's got the Pennsylvania driver's license that we keep renewing.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's, but yeah, we do enjoy that going back. And the summer again, we'll go there for a long stretch. And the kids actually say to me on a regular basis, "So I can't wait to go to America. I love America." But I also always have in the back of my head, my parents are getting older. At some point, they're not going to be there anymore. My mom said that as well, and that's one thing that came up recently we've been looking for years for like a plot of land there or something, like a foot on the ground, just to have something simple structure, but just a place that we can go and stay instead of always going to my childhood home where my parents still live.
Yep.
And my mom said just 2 weeks ago, she goes, well, what if your father and I aren't here anymore, which we won't be? Would you still then come back to your hometown if we're not here? And so that I thought was a really good question and something to really think about. And the answer for me is yes, I would still want to have a place there to visit my friends, to go back to the roots, to be able to share that with my children. But, those are questions I think we always have to ask ourselves. And maybe the answer changes. Maybe my answer is different in a year from now. But
Yep.
I think it's important to ask ourselves these questions.
I agree. Because you really do have roots in two places now.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're spanning an ocean with your roots.
Yes.
And so did you guys have those conversations before? I mean, it seems like you had to kind of make a strategic move with the jobs and stuff, but those are big questions that sometimes don't get asked in the midst of a new relationship or a new country or a new job assignment. Is what are our intentions? What are our shared values? And so did you guys have that, or did you just share values enough? Like, what did that look like for you in the beginning?
Well, we definitely share values, and we've tried different things. Like we have actually physically gone to the U.S. and done a sabbatical when 2 of the 3 kids were very young before they started school in the Netherlands. Like, let's just try family life over there. So we actually went for 3 months and lived right outside of D.C., closer to my parents, to see what that felt like. And it was such a magical time, so special. And I was bawling my eyes out the day we left because I knew that this time will never come back. It was a nice test, but we realized, okay, we actually want to be in the Netherlands, raise our children there for various reasons. And then we've also tried up north in Groningen, where my husband's roots are. Like we even had our kids enrolled in school there for a while. We had this place. We took over his old home that he had grown up in as a place to come to and rent it out the bottom to make it all financially doable. But that was also a nice place. 8 years long, we'd pack in the car, diapers, dog, and head up north to Groningen every weekend when we were living in Amsterdam. So we've tried both of our hometowns to see what that would be like to actually be there and raise a family. And we determined after physically trying it, you know what? No, we're fine where we are, Amsterdam, and now we live outside of Amsterdam. But we actually went through the motions of so far as we possibly could.
Yeah, and that's really. I think that is so not normal in a way, but also so important, right? That you guys were that intentional. And so what would you say the biggest thing was that kept you closer to Amsterdam, not Groningen? Like, was there certain things you were looking for, or was it just like a feeling?
Well, the job market and the feeling. I mean, Groningen is a wonderful place to live. Just for me, though, it's an international. I feel like there were more opportunities. And also at the time I was still working for CIE, I believe. So it just made more sense to be in Amsterdam.
Yeah. I always say Amsterdam is the place where I can do everything I need to do, be a mother, be a business person, because it can all happen within such a short amount of time. No traveling, mistakes can be made, lunches can be forgotten.
Yes.
But I know it's different for everybody. And so I always love to ask that question. And I think I'm ready to be wrong about this, but I think it might be one of the only cities in the world where that's possible.
You might be right about that.
So, but I'm willing to be, if anyone's listening and they would like to bring me another city, I would love to hear it.
They might say Copenhagen.
Yeah. Copenhagen was the second on our list. Second on our list was Copenhagen.
Okay.
Okay. So I want to now get into your journey as a writer, because I think you've done all these, started all these amazing things, including the Amsterdam Academy Press, which I want to touch on a little bit later. But when did you know you wanted to also write, or has this been something you've just always done?
It hasn't been something I've always done, just occasionally, and also academic writing, throughout college. But I have had a piece of me that always wanted to write a book. I joined Amsterdam writing workshops to get used to sharing work and getting feedback on work, which was wonderful. So I did that for a couple of months, at least 6 months. And then the pandemic hit. But I was like, this is a time, if any, with the quietness to actually write, which a lot of people did use that time to write a book. But for me, accountability was huge. So I knew I needed an accountability partner, an editor that I could submit chapters to and work my way through the book. So that's exactly what I did. I had the pleasure of meeting Andy Huber, no relation, but she happened to be from the US in Amsterdam during the pandemic because her husband was transferred for a job. And we worked out this nice deal where I would submit chapters to her, she'd give me the edits, feedback, and we just went through the entire book that way. And from that Spark network that you mentioned at the beginning, from female entrepreneurs in the Netherlands, I gathered a team of these very talented women, graphic designers, someone to do the layout, to help me bring this book to life. So it was a nice collaboration in that sense. But the writing process was a wonderful way also for me to, write about the whole pros and cons and weighing things. It started out as autobiographical, and then I tried to make it more and more fiction. So using my own story to weave in
Yes.
more of these,
So tell us
raise
about,
the stakes.
yeah. So tell us about Place, please.
So Place is a book about a radio journalist named Jill Stone, who is like a perfectionist. She's similar to my story. She's spent half of her life in the Netherlands, and now she agreed always with her Dutch husband. Now it's time for us to give half the next 20 years to the US. So they have this whole back and forth, and she gets offered last minute her dream job as NPR European correspondent. So she has to make this decision. Like, they have everything set to go to the US. Their house is on the market for sale. They have this wonderful life. But yeah, now their one child is going to college, got a scholarship in the US. So everything is, and her husband, Dutch husband, got a job in the US. So everything's pointing to the US. But then she gets thrown this curveball. And so I'm trying to show throughout the book of all the decisions that you have to make in your life, and whether you choose for career or a particular culture, and how both cultures kind of play a role in your life, and that worsteling, as they say in Dutch, that wrestling, internal wrestling that you have, and dilemmas. So that's what I was trying to reflect with this book. I won't give too much away. There's all these exciting things that happen to keep that reader reading through those chapters. But it went through 3 different genres. So autobiography, autofiction, and then fiction. So that's
Yeah.
that book in a
And
nutshell.
when I asked you, my trusted book friend, what I should give my friend who is leaving and trying, kind of looking at these questions for herself, it was a very good choice, because I think it feels like you can wrestle with some of these questions that we all have: to stay, to go, where to go next, whether we're here for a lifetime. Accidentally, 1 year turns into 19. For me, 1 year turns into 7. And
Yeah.
so I think it's a beautiful way of bringing this, like you said, wrestling to life. So it's really nice. And so I think also it covers everything we've just talked about. What I love is that you were kind of beta testing your own idea in a way. So self-publishing then turned into you being an author for the first time, then turned into you then supporting others through that process. If I'm not mistaken, that's what Amsterdam Academy Press does.
Yes, exactly. And so last fall, I was sitting on the balcony with my mother-in-law, my Dutch mother-in-law, and her partner. Her partner is a retired publisher. And they said, well, what's next? Because I finished that interim position. I went back to CIE to help them out as they were rebuilding after the pandemic, which was a wonderful but busy 5 months. And then that was rounded off, rebuild the team. And then this book was out. And I thought, well, what I would really love is to start a publishing house, but not your typical publishing house. So I wouldn't have anything to do with the royalties in the book or rights. I would just help people, enable them to self-publish. So share this wonderful team of freelancers I have with other people, and guide them from A to Z, or just cherry picking different things that they need, and providing that accountability to get your book out into the world, to actually birth your book out into the world. So that's how Amsterdam Academy Press started. And that's since January. Now we have 6 clients already, actually 7 now. And we've already, I have a couple of books that have already come out that have just turned out so great, and more to come this summer. So it's just been such a treat working on other people's stories and getting them out there, and 15 wonderful freelancers that are sharing their skill set with others as well,
So you
doing it
created what you
together.
needed, basically.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so we say self-publishing powered by Amsterdam Academy Press, because it's really a service platform. We don't, we just want to enable people to basically run their own shop, run their own author page, and for the rest of their life make an income that's just trickles in for the rest of their life, because they have this book either in audio book form, ebook, or
Yeah.
print on demand.
And I have two directions I want to take this. I want to ask first, what is the difference? Because I know you give talks about this, about what's the difference between self-publishing, publishing with a publishing house. Like, can you just run us through that difference or what that was like?
Yeah, well, the thing is, I think self-publishing is not for everyone. I'll start off by saying that. But what I learned when I was looking for an actual traditional publisher is you have to have a lot of patience because you're sending out your query letters, trying to find an agent, a literary agent. That could take a year, 2 years. I've heard from friends, that send out like 70 letters and then get 70 rejection letters back. I'm just too impatient for that. I would want to like literally roll up my own sleeves and figure it out. Of course, there's the whole thing of more prestige to an actual traditional publishing house that you get, that someone wants to put your book out there into the world. But then there's also less control about the decision making process, the book cover, the way it's marketed, if it's marketed at all, things like that. So the thing about self publishing is you do have to have a certain level of tech savviness or at least an openness to learn, because there are so many platforms out there and accounts that help you, enable you to get your book out there and get it up on these distribution channels. But it also allows for a lot of autonomy and freedom to make all the choices you want and to come out with a book that is exactly how you want: the sizing, the cover, the paperweight, the font, everything. And those are the things that I love, helping people, obsessing about margins and making sure the spine is just right. So that I think is the most fun process, really. And yeah, I think an important fact recently that it helped me is first time authors that go through traditional publishing get $300 to $500. Oh, sorry, 300 to 500 books they sell in the first year. When you self-publish, the average is 100 books the first year that you are selling. So but you're keeping a lot of that in your own pocket instead of. So I mean, I know there's lots of other facts and statistics I could throw out there, but I thought that's just interesting. I don't think everyone assumes. I think if you go through a traditional publisher, oh, you're going to sell millions, you're going to be a New York Times bestseller. Not so much. Most first-time authors.
Yeah.
So then, when you think about it in that way, it's like, okay, well, let's just get this done. Let's just get it out there and make all these decisions and
Yeah. And you're
sell
enabling
as
that.
many as we can.
And so
Yeah, yeah.
I think I want to ask you this. So do you think this brings about stories that otherwise maybe wouldn't be told?
I think so. I think, at least from the people I've spoken to, a lot of people have that manuscript that's been laying around collecting dust, and they just haven't had reason or enough confidence or enough budget, frankly, to put it out there. And what I'm trying to let people know is, you have all these great crowdfunding tools these days, so you can raise the money to just get it to the point where you can put it out on print on demand. So as soon as someone wants to go and order your book, at that moment it's printed, so you don't have the printing cost. There are more affordable ways of doing it. We also try to keep our pricing low, keeping that in mind. But I think there's a lot of stories, and it's been a beautiful process. Everything from people diagnosed with terminal cancer that say, hey, this is my last chance to leave something behind in the world. And I'm going to link my book up to a fundraiser link that's a gift that keeps giving for cancer research, for example. Or someone who has like the adoption story, and they have this beautiful piece of work that they've been collecting, and it's in such a state now that it's ready to release and put out there, and it's something to leave behind also for his son. Or someone who has a business, Claire Baum with the Thinking Museum. She has this beautiful theory about slow looking, and she's putting that into a beautiful book to help museum educators. So there's so many different types of books that I do feel are now getting out there because it's so much easier now to self-publish.
Yeah. And do you think, I know your authors are men and women, but do you think this is maybe uniquely a process that could also bring more women's voices into publishing?
I think so, definitely. And I think it's a great way, for example, with the solopreneurs, a lot of women that have these amazing businesses or practices as a way for them also to get the word out about their business and get more clients that way as well by sharing their knowledge. And
Yeah.
I think
Because
that's
otherwise they'd
nice.
have to kind of go it alone with a publisher, and that's like kind of too overwhelming. But this is a good in between. And if they have someone like you to kind of shepherd them through, it's just that little bit of extra support that maybe someone wouldn't otherwise give themselves, maybe.
Definitely. And I think it's so important to find an editor that you trust and like working with, like with the developers, because some people come to us where they have their manuscripts already pretty much ready to go, and some haven't even started writing yet. So I think it's, and at first I was only expecting people that are ready to go, but I think it's important to also address those authors that haven't written but need that guidance and accountability, which is such an important part of the process, and to match them with the right editor that is specialized in their field or they have a good connection with, and just that back and forth and getting it through
Yeah, tell me a little.
to the state where it
So,
can
for
go.
those who aren't writers or publishers, tell us how that collaboration works. I think it's a very special creative relationship.
With the developmental editor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, normally I try to match the person depending on, well, who has time to work on the project is really important. I think it's important that you can give as much time as possible to the author, to your client. And each one of them has a style sheet that they come up with. We have clients from the UK, but also the US, and we have different rules depending on where you plan on distributing your book and marketing it. So those are things we take into account, but also matching personality wise and doing an actual either in-person coffee or FaceTime Zoom call just to get a feel for that person's personality,
It feels
and
like
to
it's a
match them up.
combination of like a collaboration, a therapist. Like it feels like it's a very close collaboration.
It is, yeah, and because writing's tough, as you know, it's a tough job,
Not a
and
writer.
there.
Everyone, I'm not a writer. Hannah is just pay no
Oh,
attention
yes,
to
you
Hannah.
are.
I took a
No.
class from you to be around other writers, and it paid off. You guys are amazing. But yeah, no, I think writing
uh,
is a skill that is like good to cultivate anytime. Um, but that collaboration, I can sense, and from my own work as a filmmaker, I can sense it is very deep and rich, and can be life changing if done
Well, and you
correctly.
need a cheerleader. You really need that cheerleader, because any type of artist, whether it be a writer or a videographer or painter, they're always going to be critical of their own work, and nothing's ever going to be good enough, and all that self-doubt. And the editor is the one that says, no, come on, this was great, and gives helpful feedback that you can actually apply. But if I didn't have that cheerleader to root me through all the way to the end, it just won't get finished. I think that's the most important part, and that's what I want to instill in people, is to finish. Just let's do this. It doesn't have to be perfect. And another nice thing I heard recently is even the traditional publishers only catch 95% of the errors. So there's always that 5% margin for error. And you know what? So what if there's a period there that was supposed to be there? I mean, most of it, majority is great. So just get the idea out there, get that story out there. It's so important that we leave stories behind in this world. It's important that you have these audiobooks that your grandchildren later can hear your voice talking. Um, I
You're gonna
mean,
make me cry, Hannah. This is not fair.
that's the most important thing, I think, is just leaving something behind in the world. And what better way to do that than through a book or a piece of work, artwork,
Yeah.
video, film.
Yeah. Well, and I truly believe that stories are how our culture is transferred. And so, as many voices as possible should be available to tell stories with whatever medium, film, literature, whatever that is. And so, I strongly resonate with what you're doing. And I think that it's really, really important work and fun work, and something you're really good at. If I was going to write a book, I would come to you. I think you're an amazing thought partner. And yeah, I think what you're doing is really thoughtful, if not very cool. Like it's very cool, but at the heart of it, it's very thoughtful, very you, very centered on what you're with your entire life path. It's like lined up to this. So I think it's really beautiful. And I want to congratulate you for 6 titles in less than a year. That's pretty amazing.
Thanks. And what I also want to share is another reason, maybe, I don't know, it's not a selfish reason that I wanted to start this, but after years of running a community building platform, Amsterdam Academy, we did a little bit of rebranding by throwing the press there on the back, but didn't have to change too much, luckily. It was always hard to explain what I did to other people, even with Spark, with the female entrepreneurs. Like, I'm connecting Dutch locals to international citizens through knowledge sharing, through workshops. And it was just always, no one seemed to really get it. At the cocktail party, I was explaining what I did. And when my Dutch mother-in-law asked me last fall, what do you want to do? I'm like, if I could just say I had a publishing house, then people get it. Like, I can just say, hey, it's a publishing house for those that want to self-publish. Done. easy and people get it. And I'm still doing the same thing I did before, in a sense of bringing stories out into the world, connecting people, but now it's in a format that people can digest and understand. So that's
Yep.
also a reason.
Yeah, and I find that is true with all community building. People don't really see it as a job, but it's something that is incredibly important in the world. And
Definitely.
so, like you said, you needed to put a wrapper around it that made sense to people. But that's what I think I would say women miss a lot, or we miss from women, is that we have to have that wrapper, and no one understands what we're doing. It's like, watch me for a day,
Yeah.
take me out
Right.
for a day,
Yeah.
then you'll see what I do.
Yeah.
And so I think
Yeah.
what you're saying is so true. And adding economy to anything makes it make sense in our world, right? So that and titles,
Yeah.
words. It turns out words are important, like words that mean things to everyone universally, at least in a
Yes.
few cultures. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really interesting. Okay, so I'm assuming we have some aspiring authors in our audience. How would they best connect with you?
Best way is to just send me an email, amsterdamacademy.com. On our website, you can also see all our books on there.
Guys, make sure it's bold.
And so, yeah, that's, or LinkedIn is another great way.
Okay.
And I do believe, by the way, in the power of LinkedIn. It's great. It's been wonderful also for the international community. And I'm always able to find, that's how I found my translators that I'm using now. So, yeah, definitely find me on LinkedIn or on the Amsterdam Academy website.
Okay. And then you mentioned earlier you do like a 30-minute intake sometimes, and you give online question and answers about self-publishing, which we'll link to in the show notes, which I think is really, really helpful if you're like maybe thinking about it but aren't quite, you won't call yourself a writer, maybe.
Yeah, and also worth noting, in September, when people are getting back in gear, one of our colleagues, David Chislett's giving a Unblock the Writer's Block online workshop. So 3 Tuesday nights in a row at 8 to 9 p.m. You can just sit there with your cup of tea and unblock your writer's block. And then a month later, I'll do a Zoom online about self-publishing, just the very basic general bits about it, some that we covered already during this interview, but just telling people have questions, who is it for? What are the benefits, pros and cons?
That's perfect. We'll link to everything that you just said, and then yeah, people can start on their writing journey, or at least plug in to begin that journey. And then buy the book. You're also, I want to talk a little bit about the book you have upcoming, if you don't mind. You have another one
Yeah,
that's in beta testing, reading. I'll learn the
that's
terms.
right.
Do
Yeah.
you want to give us a little snippet about it?
Yeah, sure. So when people said, "Are you going to write another book?" I always said, "No, no, no. That this was it. Check." Just like running a marathon. But there was still one more book in me, and it's actually a dedication to my grandmother, who has since passed away. But she was such a great storyteller, and she told me, I wish I would have recorded her stories. But the Eisenhower, for those that don't know, retired to my hometown of Gettysburg. There's the Eisenhower farm, and there was this country club there with all these gossipy women. So I'm like, there's a story there, and but it really got started with this framed dinner menu from the White House from May 2nd, 1960, that my grandmother and grandfather went to with their Gettysburg friends. And so we have it in my kitchen here, and everyone's always asking about it. I'm like, oh, I could make a whole story around this menu and this White House dinner. So I created Queen's Row, which refers to the row of gossip women at the Gettysburg Country Club, and it takes place in the summer of 1960. And so it's a historical fiction novel, and it was so much fun to write. And it's gone through the whole developmental editor round with Hanah Huber again, back and forth, and now it's in beta reader mode. So the idea is that it comes out, goes to proofreading in September. So October, it'll be out on the market in ebook form and print on demand and hard copy that you can order through Amsterdam's website, Amsterdam Academy's website.
Perfect.
But it's so keep an eye out for Queen's Row.
I will. I'll be reading it. Lastly, I wish we would have hit on this sooner, but tell me about print on demand. That is an amazing. It just basically is, if someone orders it, it's printed and sent to them.
Yes, it is a wonderful tool. There are various platforms out there, lots of providers of print on demand, but the one that we use is Ingram Spark, simply because that's the biggest one for North America. And having gone to the US last summer and asking bookstores, hey, can you carry a copy of my book? And they said, no, not unless it's on Ingram Spark. That's what made me go with it, because I gets it onto Waterstones, Barnes & Noble, all of that thing. Or any college bookstore, or the Strand bookstore in New York City. If you walk in, they can order it then from Ingram Spark. But it's a wonderful tool because you just set the market price where it is. The bookstores get a big discount so that it's worth their while ordering it in. And then it's only printed at the moment that someone orders it. And that's also on Amazon. And it looks great. The quality is wonderful. And it used to be even a registration fee, which they've even gotten rid of since June 1st. Used to have to pay $50 to get on their platform. That's not even the case anymore. So it's just
Wow.
free, easy, wonderful to get your books up there.
Wow.
And then people can order all around the world.
That's amazing. I had no idea this existed. This is fantastic to know. But also just maybe, just good for us. I love having this insight into the publishing world I have never even considered. So thanks for sharing the ins and outs. I'm really looking forward to your new book. I'm really looking forward to our audience getting their hands on your book, Place, as well. And then we'll link up all the stuff that you're doing with Amsterdam Academy Press as well, because I think it's one way to plug in if you really need community or you really just want to try something new, is this sort of thing. And Hanah's an expert at this. I can speak to your ability to bring people together. So that I'm very excited to share with everybody. So everyone reach out to Hanah. Thank you for joining me today. And I will post everything in the show notes.
Thanks for having me, Mikkel. It was a wonderful conversation. Thanks so much.
Thank you.